بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is session 2 of our study in Nahw. So last time we touched upon the definition of Nahw, the objective of studying Nahw, and the subject matter of Nahw. Now we're going to go into one of the discussions within the field of Nahw. Now when it comes to Nahw, you can either have singulars or compounds. So singulars are words that are single, so they're singular words, right? And compound is when you have two or more words put together. So it's hence why it's called a compound, right? So remember we said that words, when we say the term word, we're actually making it very generic because a word can either be a noun or a verb or a particle. Okay. Now, whenever there's a categorization, we need to make the definition of those categories that it's a category of in such a manner that it's making a distinction between each other. Otherwise, there's no point of actually categorizing them differently. They'll just be the same. So the definition of noun needs to make a distinction from the definition of a verb and the definition of a harf. So a noun in Arabic is a ism. A verb in Arabic is a fi'l. A particle in Arabic is a harf. The definition of a noun is a word that is independent in conveying its complete meaning and it is not associated with one of the three tenses. What does that mean? Okay, like we said just now, that a word can either be a noun or it can be a verb or it can be a particle. And a word can either be an ism or a fi'l or a harf, a noun, verb, or particle. That's why over here, if you look, if I can just, it says word, right? Even for verbs, it's word. Even for harf, is word. Because we said that when it comes to a word can either be a noun, a verb, or a particle. Hence why all of these have this similarity of being a word. Because this is a similarity, this is not enough to actually define these categories, right? These categories of a singular, because like we said, we need something distinct for each one of these to actually hold some kind of benefit in categorizing them differently. So we have to actually carry on from there. We can't stop there and just say this is a word, this is a word, this is a word. We need to carry on, right? Hence why we carry on. Word that is independent in conveying its meaning. Okay, we have something else now. Word that is independent in conveying its meaning. What does that mean? And not just its meaning, its complete meaning. Why I say complete is because of when we get to harf, this will be made clear as to why I added this term complete and I just didn't mention, its meaning. I think this will make more sense when we get to harf, why I said complete meaning and not just meaning. Okay, so word that is independent in conveying its complete meaning. That's an ism. Okay, what does that mean? Example, you have an ism. You have a noun. Example, Zaid. When you say Zaid, there's a picture that comes to mind and it's complete. There's a kind of definition that comes to mind. There's a person that comes to mind in this case, right? And just saying Zaid in of itself is conveying that kind of conceptualization of Zaid. You don't need to add anything else with Zaid to actually conceptualize, okay, what this noun denotes, which is this person Zaid. So it's complete conveyance of meaning, okay, there, right, without actually in need of anything else. So it's independent in conveying its complete meaning. You don't need to add a verb or a particle to denote this kind of definition of Zaid, this image of Zaid, the conceptualization of Zaid, right? So that's one thing. Another example would be, say, like column. You said column. Column means pen, so it's a pen. So when you actually say qalam, what comes to mind is a pen, right? And it's independent and conveys complete meaning. Meaning, when you say qalam, okay, the first thing that comes to your mind is a pen, and the only thing that comes to your mind is a pen. When you say qalam, a paper doesn't come to mind. No, a specific noun comes to mind, which is a pen. A specific item comes to mind, which is qalam, which is a pen. So it's independent in conveys complete meaning. A noun. When you mention a noun, it's independent in conveys complete meaning. It's not in need of something else, like a verb or a particle, to actually convey its meaning. It's independent in conveying its complete meaning. Does that make sense? Well, that's nouns. Then we have this other thing, and it's not associated with one of the three tenses. The reason why we need to add this is because if you look at verbs, a fi'l, that is also independent in conveying its meaning. Hence why, like we said before, when there's a categorization being made, there needs to be something distinct for them to be actually separate from one another. So if we just stopped here for ism and fi'l, then there wouldn't be any difference between ism and fi'l just by looking at their definitions. So we need to actually mention something within the definition of an ism and within the definition of a fi'l to actually make them distinct. Hence, there will be actually a benefit of categorizing them different from one another, correct? So over here, we don't stop there by just mentioning that this is a word that is independent and conveys its complete meaning, but we carry on, and it is not associated with one of the three tenses. Okay, it is not associated with one of the three tenses, meaning, and now will not have one of the three tenses. What are the three tenses? Uh, these are the three tenses. So these are the three tenses, okay, categorized, meaning the three tenses of a verb categorized from the perspective of there being a difference in meaning and not necessarily form. Why I say that is because of the Surf lesson, the lesson 2 of Surf, we're going to actually categorize the tenses of verbs in a different manner, where the categorization is done from the perspective that there is a difference in both meaning and form. So there's a difference in both meaning and form. Here, there's a difference in meaning, but not necessarily form. What does that mean? Look, if we look at these three tenses of verbs, you have the first tense, which is maldi. Maldi is the past tense form of a verb. The example I've given is doraba. Doraba means he, one man, hit. It's the third person singular male past tense form of this verb, doraba. Okay, he, one man, hit. And then the second tense is hal, which is the present tense. The example I've given is for the same verb, but in the present tense form, which is yadribu. Yadribu. Okay, he is hitting. The action of hitting is being done, right, as we speak. Mustaqbil, the third tense, is the future tense. Right, so it's not been done yet, but it will be done. And for the same verb, that is yadribu. Okay, so he will hit. And idrib, for that same verb, this is the imperative tense form, the commanding tense. So it's a command. Idrib um, also falls under the category of mustaqbil. Idrib is the command. So you, one man, hit. Okay, you, one man, hit. So notice over here that the hal, meaning the present tense, and the future tense form are the same. Hence why when I actually expressed what this is, this categorization, I said that these are the tenses of verbs from the perspective that there's a difference in meaning and not necessarily form. Because, yeah, for the Madi, there's a difference in form, but for the Hal and Mustaqbil, okay, there is not a difference in form between these two. Hence why this categorization of tenses when it comes to verbs is from the perspective that there's a difference in meaning and not necessarily form. Why that is important is because when we go to the next surf lesson, we're going to categorize it in a different manner, and it's going to be categorized from the perspective that there's going to be a difference in both form and meaning. But this is not a difference necessarily in form. It doesn't have to be necessarily different in form. Hence why it's not different in form, right? In the hal and mustaqbil, the present and the future, there's no difference in form, but there's difference in meaning. Hence why we categorize it and express it like this: that these are verbs categorized according to their tenses from the perspective that there's a difference in meaning and not necessarily form. Does that make sense? So a verb will have one of these three tenses, but a noun won't. Example that we've given of noun, right? These two examples, Qalam and Zaid. We don't see any kind of tense associated with these two nouns, and that's just for any language, right? Even in the English language, we don't see tenses being associated with nouns. Nouns are not associated with tenses, right? So this is what makes a noun distinct from verbs. Hence why they're categorized differently. A verb is exactly the same as a noun, meaning a fi'l is exactly the same as an ism. The only difference over here that makes the distinction is this last part that is associated with one of the three tenses. So a word that is independent in conveying its complete meaning, and it is also associated with one of the three tenses. Example, Maldi. All of these examples are examples of verbs, right? So the Maldi, the past tense verb, example we gave is Dolaba, right? Its conveyance can be made in of itself, right? Its meanings, its meaning is complete in of itself, right? You can actually convey its complete meaning, okay, by itself. It doesn't need to be associated with something else. It's not in need of something else to actually convey its complete meaning, right? It's independent in conveying its complete meaning. When we say daraba, okay, we get the meaning, the complete meaning, which is that this person hit. Does that make sense? We don't need to associate it with other words, whether it's a noun or a particle, to actually hold this meaning of hitting, or in the past tense, right? That it's been done, correct? And it also is associated with one of the three tenses. A noun is not associated with one of the three tenses. A verb is associated with one of the three tenses. So give all of these as examples, right? We give all of these as examples. So a madi, a past tense verb, daraba. We just mentioned that's the past tense, hence why it's associated with one of the three tenses. Hal, the present tense. So yadribu, he is hitting. Mustaqbil, he will hit. Or idrib, the imperative tense form, the commanding tense form. You hit, right? It's a command. That will also fall under the category. It will also fall under the category of mustaqbil. Does that make sense? So it has a tense, right? You might be wondering, as a side note, how do we differentiate between hal and mustaqbil if the form is the same? Well, that's up to context. You have to look at the context of the text that you're actually reading and figure it out using that. Now, harf is the third type of a word. So it's a word, right? So a word that is not independent in conveying its meaning. So unlike a noun and a verb, a harf, a particle, is not independent in conveying its meaning. So there's already a distinction being made when it comes to a harf, right? The thing that makes the harf distinct is that it's not independent in conveying its meaning. This is very difficult to understand because in the English language, we might see a particle to actually convey its meaning independently. But in the Arabic language, it's not like that. So, example given over here is min. Even the definition, right? I have made a definition, right? You can see the definition from. I have made a definition, so it's very difficult to actually understand this because there is a definition, right? I just wrote it down here from, and it's independent. You don't see any other word being associated with it to actually hold this meaning of from. But in the Arabic language, it's not like that. In the Arabic language, these particles, right? The example min, they're not really independent in conveying their meaning unless it's been associated with another, others, right? It needs to be associated with others for it to convey its meaning. Does that make sense? They don't, in the Arabic language, it's not recognized to be independent in conveying its meaning. It needs to be associated with other words. Okay, does that make sense? So you just need to bear with it. Even though in the English language you might say, "Oh, min actually holds a meaning, and it's independent," because we can say min holds the meaning of from. Correct. But in the Arabic language, it's not like that. You just need to, you know, kind of conceptualize it in the way that the Arabic language wants you to understand the discussion. Okay, so min is not independent in conveying its meaning. It needs to be associated with other words. It needs to be coupled with other words. Okay, let's understand this. Min, okay, I've translated it as from for the sake of it, right? But min actually holds the definition and the meaning of ibtida. Ibtida means to start. Right? Min, it holds the definition of the start of something, right? But you can only hold the start of something, meaning min can only hold the start of something when it's been associated with something to actually denote the start of, right? If that makes sense. So in of itself, it doesn't denote the start of anything, right? Because for it to actually denote and express the start of something, it needs to actually be associated with something to denote the start of. That makes sense. So just give me an example, right? So if I give an example, Ja'a Zaydun minal bayti. You're gonna have to bear with this. I know it's wrong, but it's a cursor that I'm using, so it's very, very difficult. Like it's extremely difficult. This is literally painful. Right. Uh, okay. Ja'a Zaydun min al-bayti ila al-masjid. Zayd went from the house to the masjid. We've used the particle min. Now that we've actually coupled min with other words and made a sentence out of it, okay, min now can actually denote this benefit of being the start of something, right? It can actually, indicate upon the start of something. Now that it's been associated with other words, we can say what the start is of and where is it from. Where is the start from and what is the start of, right? The start, it's of the action of going, right? This is what the start is about. The start is about the action of going. Zaid went. Okay, and the action of going, where is it from? It's from the house. We only can say this when we've associated min with other words. Min alone doesn't give, what the start is of and nor where the start is from. Correct? So you just need to understand it like that. Even though technically in the English language we do recognize min having a meaning in of itself, right? Because anybody asks you, what does min mean? You say from, and from that perspective, you could actually get the idea that it is independent in conveying its meaning. But the Arabic language doesn't actually recognize it. Okay, according to what it's used for, to be independent in conveying its meaning, it needs to be associated with other words to actually convey what it's there for, which is to denote the start of something, the ibtida of something. Does that make sense? So a particle is like that, right? A word that is not independent in conveying its meaning, and it's also not associated with one of the three tenses. A particle is not associated with one of the three tenses, right? We're never going to say that min is associated with the tense of madi or the tense of ha or mustaqbil. We're not going to say, oh, this particle is in the past tense. No, it doesn't make sense. Not even in any language, right? It's straightforward, right? Does that make sense?